line, and sinker. So Brother Trevor will be preaching for us tonight, so I'm looking forward to that. And that's just a reminder. We're going to be doing that series together, kind of going back and forth. And so it's his night tonight. And so look out. Yeah, exactly. So let's go ahead and take our Bibles. And I want you to go ahead and turn to start out with, go to Titus chapter 1. Actually, go to 1 Corinthians chapter 10, and then leave your finger there and flip over to Titus chapter 1. Titus 1 technically isn't in my notes, but I want to build on, as we've been looking at Titus. Last week we looked at our communication. The last 2 weeks, really, we've looked at communication. We looked at Psalm chapter 1, and we looked at learning to live in the wisdom of God. And if we're living in the wisdom of God, it's going to lead us to speak like we should as Christians. And we looked at last week, we looked at learning to guard our speech. And it's something I think all of us probably can say we probably need to work on that. You know, I know I need to work on it, and I've shared that personally. You know, there's things I have to work on when it comes to my speech and things that I say and being careful how I say things. Because sometimes, you know, you might think, and you think you're just thinking in your mind, but you actually say something out loud, and you know, it could get you in trouble. And so we've been looking at this from Titus. That's the book that we've been preaching from since the beginning of the year. And Titus chapter 1, and it's interesting. I thought I'd be done talking about speech next week, but last night I was sitting there and I was thinking forward to our Easter service, and I was thinking, well, Lord, you know, maybe we can have a service about Easter the week before Easter, and then get to Easter Sunday and preach about your resurrection. And I was just kind of thinking through that, but then God said, nope, I got another message I want you to have on our speech. I'm like, well, God, that's like 4 weeks in a row on speech. People are going to get tired of listening to me speak about speech. But Titus chapter 1, and we were in verse number 10. For there are many unruly and vain talkers and deceivers, especially they of the circumcision, whose mouths must be stopped, who subvert whole houses, teaching things which they ought not to, for filthy lucre's sake. And then if you'll skip on down to verse number 14, not giving heed to Jewish fables and commandments of men that turn from the truth. Unto the pure all things are pure, but unto them that are defiled and unbelieving is nothing pure, but even their mind and conscience is defiled. They profess that they know God, but in works they deny him, being abominable and disobedient unto every good work, reprobate. And it's really speaking of not just our speech, but also the way that we live. And we understand this is talking about the Judaizers. These are the religious people who were trying to put the law as part of salvation, and they were teaching things that they shouldn't teach. And so there was a lot of negative, unhealthy speech going on in the church in Crete. And look at the very next verse in chapter 2, verse 1, which really, if you remember, chapters and verses are not inspired. Okay? So really, if we look at the context, verse number 1 of chapter 2 really should have been alongside the thought at the end of chapter 1, because it says, but. So we understand there's a but there because it says instead of. Right? That's what it should be. Instead of these things, speak thou the things which become sound doctrine. And this is interesting, and I'll point this out in a few weeks, but when we look at that word become, we have the idea of it's becoming something. It's something that's in the process of becoming, but that's not what this word become means. You might say, like, if you see a lady and she's wearing a dress and that's really beautiful on her, you're like, that dress is very becoming of you. That's what this word means. All right? And then the word sound doctrine, and again, we'll look at this in a couple weeks because when we think doctrine, we think doctrinal statement, right? That's not what this is talking about. Sound means the idea of healthy, and doctrine means teaching. The healthy teaching. What was it that the Judaizers were doing? They were doing unhealthy teaching. And Paul says, instead, Titus, you need to do that which befits healthy teaching. And that's what God calls us to, and that will be what we look at here in just a few weeks, the positive side of what God expects from us. But today, I felt like God wanted us to go here, and I think it's something that it's a topic that you might be like, well, it doesn't apply to me. I would say the topic that we're going to look at today probably applies to at least 80% of people who are in this building, because it affects 82% of the population of the United States, and that's this idea of the blessings and pitfalls of social media. You say, well, Pastor, that's just a weird message to preach on a Sunday morning. That sounds like a Sunday night message, blessings and pitfalls of social networking or social media. Well, it might sound like it should be a Sunday night message, but I believe it's something that all of us need to hear, because regardless whether it's something we're posting on social media or it's how we're living our life, it affects how others view Christ around us. You might say, I don't even have a social media account, Pastor, but you can still take the same principles we're going to look at today in this, and you can apply it to any other area of your life. So I didn't really, social media has been around for almost 20 years. It actually seems like it's been around a whole lot longer than that. But one of the first social media platforms was MySpace. That started around 2008. Facebook was just starting around that time. So social media has only been around for 20 years. It seems like it's been around for a whole lot longer than that. And it seems like it's increasingly getting more and more in our lives. In fact, I was telling my pastor this morning, I said, I'm surprised. Now we got the, Truth Network, President Trump's social media that he's created. Elon Musk has already said, I'm going to create one because Twitter is censoring all these people, and now we got more and more social media stuff that's coming up. But here's the thing, it is so interesting. We are more connected with one another than we ever have been in the entire history of man, yet we are more lonely than we've ever been. And we're less connected face to face than we've ever been. I can remember, and it's funny because I like to talk to teens, and I was like, there was a time I didn't have a cell phone. Yeah. My first cell phone I didn't have until my senior year of college. Oh, you must be really old. My senior year of college was 2006. That's not that long ago. That's only 16 years ago. And nowadays, everybody thinks, and my first cell phone was a candy bar cell phone. It was a Nokia, had a flashlight on the end. The only game it had was Snake. It was amazing. It wasn't like these smartphones. I could drop it on the ground and completely fall apart, and I could put it back together, and it didn't cost me $2,000, $3,000 for a phone. Yeah, we got those for free. Yeah, they were great. But social media has been around for about 20 years, and whether you realize it or not, it affects every single person, young and old, even if you don't use it. It's interesting. My pastor, he was one person that was like, I will never have a social media account. He said, I signed up, I had Facebook. He's like, I only had my family on there, and all of a sudden, all these people started popping up. Friend this, friend request, and people I went to high school with. And he's like, I didn't want to know anything about anybody that I went to high school with. I wasn't interested in their lives. He said, so I mainly had it to monitor what my own kids were doing, and then I shut it down because I was like, forget it. And he's like, and to this day, he does not do social media. And he's like, I don't want to do social media, but it doesn't mean it didn't affect things. Because there was going to be times that he'd say, Aaron, I just don't know what we're going to do. We got this group of people here who are messaging one another as if they're messaging from the church, and it has nothing to do with the church. It was affecting the church, though. It affects every person, young or old. Before we get into the blessing and pitfalls of social media, because there are some blessings, but I'm going to tell you there's far more pitfalls. Now, the blessings can be used, but we have got to be vigilant with how we use and view social media. Before we get into those blessings and pitfalls, I want to look at some staggering statistics that will help you realize how important it is for you to keep yourself and your family safe from making mistakes on social network sites. Safety, not only the area of physical identity, but more importantly, your spiritual identity. So here's some statistics of social network, and some of these might surprise you. 82% of people in the United States have at least one social media account. In 2008, it was 10%. I mean, 90% of the world, the entire world's population, has a social media account. 90% of companies check social media accounts of potential employees. And 79% of those same companies have rejected potential employees because of what they found on their social media accounts. So be careful what you put on your social media. It will affect you. 84% of U.S. companies use social networking when recruiting new employees. So it's something that's used, and a lot of these companies will use this. 17% of those profiles viewed were found to have lied on their resumes. Oh, that's not that. No, that's a lot of people. There's a lot of people, and 17% of people lie on their resume. 17% of U.S. employees have fired employees for something said or some picture posted on social media. Most public schools, especially elementary, middle school, and high school, have disclosures where teachers have to sign off that they won't post certain things on social media, and that they will not friend students or parents of students on social media. There's a reason why. Because teachers are supposed to be looked at in a higher regard than to every average day person. Unfortunately, it's not doing a very good job. 81% of divorce cases in 2021 say things found on social media network sites are being used as grounds for divorce. With all these negative statistics, it's easy for us to see that social networking can be a huge pitfall for people. We will look today at the blessings and pitfalls of social media and how it affects you. First, we will look at the pitfalls, and then we're going to look at the potential blessings, and then we'll look at one last thing and how to protect yourself. And I think it's an important thing. 1 Corinthians 10, verse number 31 says, "Whether therefore you eat or drink or whatsoever ye do," how are we to do it? Do it all to the glory of God. Here's the thing. I don't think many of us think through that verse. Whether therefore you eat or drink or whatsoever you do. And again, we'll come back to this passage at some point in time because it's talking about all sorts of different things in 1 Corinthians about, meat offered to idols and eating with lost people and, guarding ourselves from being a stumbling block to our brothers and sisters in Christ. There's a lot of good information from 1 Corinthians. We aren't going to look at that today, though. But whether therefore you eat or drink or whatever you do all to the glory of God. That means including our social media, what we post, what we email. I can remember I was joking with somebody the other day. I was like, man, I can remember, when internet first came out, AOL. You had to wait 5 minutes for it to connect to the internet. And then we had this really cool thing called AOL Instant Messenger. man, that was the easiest way to communicate with people. And the internet was so super fast. It was so super fast. It only took 10 minutes for a website to load. I mean, it was amazing. Today things are so instantaneous that we say and do things without thinking about it. And so the first thing I want us to see with the potential pitfalls of social networking is bragging and focusing on self. Remember, we taught against that last week when it comes to ourselves. God tells us to be humble. God's desire is for his children to be humble. And I'm going to go to a lot of scriptures. I have them just in my notes. You can try to turn to them, but I'll probably just go ahead and, for time's sake, just read them. 1 Corinthians 5:5 says, "Likewise, ye younger, submit yourselves to the elder. Ye all of you be subject one to another, and be clothed with humility." That's interesting. Mike, you were preaching from that passage this morning. I didn't even think about it. "For God resists the proud, and he gives grace to the humble." The goal of the Christian should not be how many people follow you, but how you are following Christ. Now I understand to grow things, it's important. Again, I've used social media, and I had a graphic design business for 17 years, and I used social media to try to get people to use my business, and I would invite people to like my company. And likes were very important to my business because that meant more connections for my business. And I understand that. Likes are an important thing. And then even as I started recording some music and releasing it, I created a page for Aaron McBride Music, and I invited people to come like that and things like that. But if we're not careful, so many times we might get to this place where we think, all these likes are important. I just want to tell you something. All right, so when I started doing the music, all of a sudden I started getting all these friend requests, and so I accepted them because I thought, well, this is a potential person that's going to listen to the music, which could be a blessing to them, and it could be a blessing to me as well because, hey, I get paid if people listen to my music on Spotify. All of a sudden I look and I have 4,500 friends. I don't know any of them. Maybe 200 out of those 4,500 people are people I actually know and care about. And so it's funny now, I really could care less who's on there, and so I'll just be like, oh, you said something dumb, I'm going to take you off my friends list because I don't want to be thinking I'm associated with you, You weren't my friend in the first place. But so many times, and this is what happens, and there's a correlation, I didn't look this statistic up, so I don't really know what the statistic is, but there is a correlation between suicides and social media. Somebody sets up their social media site, they put a picture up that's really cool or whatever, and they don't get enough likes, they don't have people liking it, they don't have thousands of people liking their stuff, and all of a sudden they feel depressed and they say, well, I'm just going to take my life because nobody thinks I'm important. It happens. People trying to go viral with videos. There was a couple in Canada. They were trying to go viral with a video, and they were going across a waterfall that was very dangerous, and they both fell to their death. Why? To get people's likes. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Well, as much as we look at that as being ridiculous, how many of us will do the same thing? Well, I'm going to go to church because I want everybody at church to think that I love Jesus. That's the reason why you come to church. You're coming for the wrong reason. Because coming to church doesn't show people how much you love Jesus, because Jesus knows your heart. You can't trick Jesus. But so many times with this social media, it becomes all about myself, about me. We'll get on there and we'll complain. Well, nobody likes me. Nobody does this for me. Nobody does that for me. It's all about me, 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 me. God's not happy with that. God says He wants us to be humble. He resists the proud, but He gives grace to the humble. In Mark chapter 8, verse number 34, it says, "And when He had called the people unto Him with His disciples also, He said unto them, Whosoever will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. I'm going to tell you something. When it comes to our lives as Christians and this whole social media thing, we got to set ourselves aside, because Jesus says, you want to follow me, then you've got to put yourself aside. And look, there are preachers on there that have hundreds of thousands of followers, and you can tell they have hundreds of thousands of followers because they'll brag about it. That's not a man of God. That's not a person who's bringing glory to God. That's a person bringing glory to himself. But I have to guard myself from that as well. I'm not going to sit there and land blast somebody else when I've got to say, I need to guard myself this way too. Hey, did I just put that post up because I want people to read it and get a bunch of likes? I'll admit, sometimes I've done that. It's not right. It's not good. B, creating a false identity. About 27% of profiles created for social networks are fake identities. Why does somebody set up a fake identity? Because they want to pretend that they're somebody that they're not. Actually, I'm going to tell you this. The truth is, if they set up a fake identity and they're living in that fake identity, that's showing the truth of who they are. To hide things they don't want others to know about. I'm going to tell you, and it's a shame. I hate it. There are some good things that God can do, I think, through some Christian families who God has allowed them to be kind of in the spotlight, but then there's others who have been put in the spotlight that puts Christianity to shame. There's two families that were put in the spotlight on TV, and you probably have heard of both of them. Maybe you had the Duggars, and then you had the Bates family. And I always told Renee, I said, I don't know. There's something about that Duggar family that just seems fake. Again, I don't know them, so I can't say. But then in a couple years of them being on TV, their son being found out that he had profiles on sites that promoted sexual activity, cheating sites. There's something fake about it. Now, the other family, I like the Bates. I told her, I said, I don't know. To me, they always live like who they really are in front of people. That's just observation. I don't know either family, so I can't say. But if there's 27% of people that have fake profiles, how many of those people identify as Christians? And create themselves a profile because, well, everybody expects me to live like a Christian because I come from a Christian home, but I'm not really a person who loves Jesus. They do it to hide things, to do things that are wrong. Matthew 12:34 says, O generations of vipers, how can ye being evil, speak good things? For out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh. If somebody's having a fake profile, it's because they're speaking out of the abundance of their heart. They're speaking out of the abundance of their heart. Look, I'm just going to tell you. There are things that people will say on social media that they would never say out loud in person. There are things that they would post on social media that they would not be dead posting on a picture to give to somebody. But out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So whatever it is that you share, whatever it is that you're doing on social media, that's speaking of what your true heart is. So you ought to take check into things that you're saying, things that you're doing. Now, am I saying that it's all bad? No. I'm not saying it's all bad. I changed my profile to the Colts. Why did you do that? Because my Falcons, they traded my favorite player away to the Colts. Now, let's see, what's your team? Denver? 49ers? Oh, they're in the NFC. You don't have to worry about it. Number 3, time wasting and distractions. It wastes employee time and studying time. And I just looked up this morning, because I was like, I want to make sure I have the right number here. As of 2022, the average person uses social media 2 hours and 30 minutes a day, either on the computer or on their phones. That's 17 and a half hours a week. It's almost a full day. That's a lot of time. And I guarantee you a lot of that time is done while they're on the clock working for an employee. Why do I know that? Well, there was times I was substitute teaching that I'd be like, oh, I'm going to check my social media. You know? Oh, the kids are on break. I'm on my phone. 30 minutes until they get off break. Just wasted 30 minutes. And sometimes before I go to bed at night, I'm like, oh, let's see what's going on. Let's see if they found that guy. You know, let's see if they found that lady, which I think is a good thing. It can be a good thing. I'm not saying that every time that you get on social media, it's a waste of time. But we sure do waste an awful lot of time. What happens? You know, God has called us to be a steward of time. Ephesians 5:16 says, redeeming the time because the days are evil. When we get wrapped up in wasted time on our social media accounts, it takes away family time. Puts up a communication block. I always like this idea. I've never done it because I typically try to not look at my phone while we're sitting down eating someplace. But, you know, a lot of people, they have trouble with that. You know, they go to a restaurant and they get their phone out. They're like, oh, we're waiting for our food. Instead of having a conversation with somebody. And so I saw this idea where they're like, hey, listen, this is the way it's going to work. We put our phones on the table and we stack them on top of each other. Whoever checks their phone first has to pay for everybody's meal. And if nobody checks their phone until the end of the meal, then we have separate checks. Why? Because we miss that face-to-face interaction. It's important. You know, one of the things I'm excited about us having our afternoon service is the meal in between services and sitting down and having face-to-face conversations. Because here's the fact. And you might not think this, but I've watched it. I've been a part of churches for a long time. The average person comes into church. Hi, Miss Michelle, good to see you. Sits down in their pew, gets done with church. See you next week, Miss Michelle. And that's all the interaction we have. As a church, we should be different anyways. We should have more interaction with one another other than just a hi and a bye. Now, I have to say that there's quite a few people here at church that they'll hang around and they'll talk for a while after church. That's a good thing. But there's people that come to this church that you probably don't even know that well because you've never had a chance to sit and talk with them. Well, we have a meal together. We can sit and talk to each other. We can redeem that time. We can get to know those people. We can know how to pray for those people better. It's more than just a hi and bye and a quick in and out. The church should have a closeness together that the world never has. But we've lost that because we become so busy in our society. We become such time wasters. We think, you know, if somebody can spend 2.5 hours on a phone or on a computer looking at social media, we can't sit there and say we're too busy for people. We can't. It's because we choose not to interact with people. Yeah, do we get busy throughout the week? Absolutely. You know, it's funny, Robbie's gone with me a couple times, or spent a couple days with me at times, and he's like, I just kind of want to see what you do as a pastor. Well, you know, okay, come on. Pastor, it feels like you've been spinning your wheels all day. You haven't got anything done. I said, well, we got a lot done. I had to go over here and do this, and I had to go over to here and do that. I had to call this person and check on them here. And, hey, we need to sit down. I need to work with you through children's church stuff and children's ministry stuff. And then, well, I need to go run over to the school and do this. And, yeah, it's a busy life. There's busyness that goes on. But sometimes we need to step back and say, you know what, hold on. There's days, Saturdays, I try to guard my Saturdays from doing anything other than spending time with family. Now, I know we have our men's meeting, and we have our ladies' meeting. Those are important, but those are once a month. I usually try to guard my Saturdays where, hey, if we need to do yard work, we can do that together as a family. If I want to go do something with the kids, we can go do that on Saturday. I used to not do that. When I had my own business, man, 20 hours a week at the church and then 40 to 60 hours a week doing graphic design work. And it'd be like, okay, well, I'm at the church. I'm working until 2 o'clock. Then I got to go pick up the kids from school. And as soon as I get back home, we'll have dinner. And I'm going to work till 10 o'clock at night. And I was doing that every day. And then Saturdays, I was working from morning till night. Preparing Sunday school classes, doing this, doing all these different things. Trying to provide for a family. But then I got to realize, you know what? My family's suffering because I'm not redeeming the time like I should. Man, if I can cut out 2.5 hours of social media a week, and just maybe even only look, 10 minutes a day, or just don't look at all. That's 17.5 hours that I'm no longer wasting on social media. Again, social media can be used for good things. We'll see that in a minute. Materialism. Pitfall, materialism. The seeking of attention. 3 John. There's 2 men in 3 John. There's Diotrephes and what's the other guy's name? Well, Diotrephes is the one we want to look at, so we won't worry about the other guy right now. I wrote unto the church, but Diotrephes, who loved to have the preeminence among them, received us not. Diotrephes was this guy in the church, and I don't know, it surprises me that John didn't write to the church and say, get that guy out of there. It's almost like he just left him there. Diotrephes is the kind of person that when you got to the church, he was going to be the first one to greet you, and if you didn't spend time with him, he was going to make sure you spent time with him. He was going to make sure that you paid attention to him. Have you ever known anybody like that in a church? Yeah. I want you to pay attention to everybody. Nobody else but me. That's who Diotrephes was. He was the kind of person like, I want the preeminence. I want everybody to see me. I want everybody to know who I am. I want everybody to talk to me. And he was the kind of person that stood out above everybody else because he was annoying. Because he wanted that preeminence. Can I tell you, a lot of people are on social media making the loudest noise, making the stupidest statements, going the most extreme and wild things because they want all the attention. It's about materialism. It's about me. I'm going to buy these crazy clothes that are wacky just because I want people to pay attention to me. I'm going to eat a Tide Pod. Because, yeah, people will pay attention and be like, what an idiot. But they're paying attention to me. I'm going to eat the hottest pepper in the world and videotape myself doing it so that everybody will laugh. You wanted to do the 1-chip challenge. I didn't see you on Facebook, though. But people do these things to get attention to themselves. What did John say? He must increase. I must decrease. And there's the lack of Christ-centered discussion. Man, people get on Facebook and they say or read things that they would never say or read face-to-face with somebody else. And I'm telling you, the amount of materialism, the amount of advertisements that are coming on social media now is enough just to be like, if my wife saw that advertisement came up, she'd be like, "What are you looking at?" I wasn't looking at anything. I was going through my social media and this pops up over the stupidest things. They're going to advertise a game and they're going to do it sexually because they know I'm a male. And they target you. Are they going to do it differently with a lady? And they've gotten a whole lot smarter with how to do this. But there are things that you will read and say that you would never read or say in front of people's face. It's gotten bad. I'm telling you, and I'm going to tell you as parents, if you have children, do not let them on TikTok. It is awful. I had gotten on TikTok because I was uploading some of my music on there to get it on there. And all of a sudden, I looked at my phone, F this and F that, and all the awful words. And I wasn't even looking at those videos. It just, as soon as it popped up. And I'm telling you, teenagers, I'm preaching to you too. You have no business. If you have TikTok, I'm encouraging. I can't force you to do it. Again, I'm not a dictator. If I could be a dictator on this, though, I would be. But if you're looking at those things, get it off. It is unhealthy. It is unwise. It will ruin you. You might say, well, these little things, it doesn't bother me that much. It's not really going to be a bother. It does. It affects you greater than you ever think. I can remember I never got to go to the theater growing up. It was just something we never did because we were always told it's evil and you don't do it. And but I got to college, and my best friend, his dad worked at a movie theater. So one spring break, went to his house for spring break, and we got to go watch all the movies we wanted. It was amazing, I thought. But you know what? As I continued to eat that diet of movies and hear language that was continual, we were sitting down. We were playing a game. It was I can't remember. It was an army game. You're going and killing other people, and training simulator type thing. America's Army is what it was called. And it was actually a program that the Army used for simulation for wartime. And I'm sitting there, and we're playing one night. We had watched 2-3 movies that day. I got back home. We were tired. We were playing late at night. And I got mad about something, and I heard words come out of my mouth that I had never spoken before in my entire life. Because I heard them, and I had a steady diet of them. And I'm telling you, social media is just getting worse and worse. Society's bad enough as it is. Stay away from it. Stay away from it. Don't have a diet of that. It's unhealthy for you. 1 Corinthians 15:33 says, "Be not deceived. Evil communications corrupt good manners." Another pitfall is it does not exalt the person of Christ. So much of what's on social media, especially even among Christians, does not exalt the person of Christ. Colossians 1:18 says, "And he is the head of the body, the church, who is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in all things he might have the preeminence." All right, that's that word again. What did it say about Diotrephes? He desired the what? Anybody know what the word preeminence means? All right, so have you ever heard a preacher say, "Oh, you need to make Jesus Christ first in your life. He needs to be the center of your life"? Many times people make that as that's what the word preeminence means. It's not. It goes far above that. Jesus doesn't want to be first. He doesn't want to be centered. He wants to be the only part of your life. Because if Jesus is the one who is preeminent in your life, like Diocletian there, what was he doing? I desire to have the preeminence, so everybody's going to pay attention to me. I'm going to make sure everybody knows who I am. Jesus needs to be known in every part of our life as not the first one, but the only one that matters. Whether that comes with our relationship in our marriage. Because here's the thing. If Jesus is preeminent in our marriage, then do you think our marriages are going to suffer? Do you think we're going to have as many disagreements with each other? No. Hey, if Jesus is preeminent, teens, in your schoolwork and in your studies, and you say, I want God to be over everything that I do, do you think you're going to find yourself at the place where so many times you're like, well, I just don't feel like studying tonight? Whatsoever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. That's what Jesus says. Right? He wants to be preeminent. But what happens is we do not exalt Christ so many times in social media. Also gossiping. Right? Matthew 18:15 says, Moreover, if thy brethren shall trespass against thee, go and tell him his fault between thee and him alone. If he shall hear thee, thou hast gained thy brother. But what happens so many times is, oh, did you hear what so-and-so said to me? I just can't believe they treated me this way. I hope I can forgive them. Well, you just blasted all over Facebook for everybody to see, and now you just made that other person look like they're a complete heel. Would you believe what this church did to me? Well, I can't believe they did that for that person, but why didn't they do this for me? Because we got gossip, and it goes back to self-centeredness. A good rule to follow before you say anything online or in person is the acrostic think. T-H-I-N-K. Is it true? Is it helpful? Is it inspiring? Is it necessary? And is it kind? Spells think. True, helpful, inspiring, necessary, kind. Think. Think before you speak. Think through all those questions. Is it true? Well, it might be true. Oh, okay, it's true. Is it helpful? Well, I guess it depends on how I say it. It could be helpful. Is it going to inspire them to do right? The further you go down this list, the harder it gets. Is it necessary? And is it kind? Other pitfalls, and we won't take time to really dive into these, but there's unhealthy male and female relationships. Again, there's a reason why 81% of divorce cases go to social media. Associations with the wrong crowd. An online philosophy or personality becomes a reality. It becomes a stumbling block. Those are all the negative, the pitfalls. There's not as many things listed for, in fact, that's more than half of the message. The last third of the message is potential blessings of social networking and practicing principles for spiritual conduct. Pastor, you sure gave a whole lot of pitfalls. Because I told you there's a lot more pitfalls than there are blessings. The potential blessings of social networking is the witness for Christ. A witness for Christ. You know, God has told us in Mark 16:15, He said unto them, Go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. I'm going to tell you something. The invention of social media, as awful as it was, it has a potential to do great things. I can remember, I believe it was John R. Rice. He said, could you imagine what would have happened if the church had embraced television and had used it for God's glory instead of shunning it and giving it to Hollywood? What a world of difference it would have made. I believe we kind of did the same thing with social media. Oh, we don't want to use social media. Don't you know that's of the world? the church is so good about shunning anything that's new and not seeing the potential for God to use it in a magnificent way. It's interesting because it hasn't been until probably the last 10, 12 years that Christians have gotten on board with making good quality entertainment movies that aren't cheesy. Right? You think about it. I mean, back when I was a kid, David and Goliath, it was a claymation movie and it was awful. What was that old the old Rapture movie before Left Behind and all those come on, what was the name of that? A Thief in the Night. There was a series. It was done in the 70s. It was awful. Terrible. But it took us a long time to get on board to actually do things that actually has the potential to reach people. That TV show, The Chosen. Man, millions of people are watching that show, and it's done at a good quality production, but it also gives us a good view of Jesus Christ. The gospel's found all throughout it. Pastor Andrew Montgomery was telling me, he said, I went and watched the Christmas special. You want to talk about a gospel message? He said that was the best gospel message I had ever seen in a movie produced by Christians. You think about Facing the Giants. Now that was a little cheesy. At the time, though, that they were moving forward. They were doing good. Now you look at the movies that the Kendrick brothers make, Fireproof, Courageous. Why? Because they realize, you know what? We don't have to produce cheesy things. We can actually do the best we can do for God's glory. But for so long, the church is like, well, we can't do that. Oh, you can't be a part of that because don't you know movies are for Hollywood? Man. We failed in opportunities. Thank God that God's giving people wisdom to do that now. Social media. It gives us the opportunity to reach our family, reach our friends, reach the uttermost parts of the world. I shared with you guys a couple weeks ago, and this is something you guys can be praying about as well. But a couple weeks ago, there's a guy, that gospel film that we put out for our church that another person had put together. They put that in the Ukraine during this time when the war first started. The first week of the war, over 2 million Ukrainians had watched the gospel film. Almost 300 had come to know Jesus Christ as their Savior as a result. You know where they advertised through? Facebook. Social media. I got a call this week, and it's something we can start praying about, but an evangelist friend of mine, he produced a gospel tract called, it's just John 3:16. A John 3:16 track, but he produced a gospel track. I designed it for him, and he called me this week. He said, Aaron, he's like, I want to print 3 million copies of this gospel track, and we translated it into Ukrainian. I want to produce 3 million of these. 1 million for here in the United States because there's 1 million Ukrainians in the United States who speak Ukrainian. And another 2 million to send overseas. And he's like, and we're going to get this thing. He said, I have a friend who's developing a QR code where they can go and scan it. If somebody scans it with their phone, it will tell us where that person was when they got the track. So we know whether it's reaching somebody in the United States or reaching somebody in the Ukraine or reaching somebody in Poland or reaching any of these other. They're using technology for God's glory. It can be used. It can be used. Brother Darrell, he was telling me the other day, what's the name of that film again? Yeah. Jose got the question right. He said, I got stuck in traffic. He's got an iPhone. So he's like, I just started airdropping it. Right? Sending it out so somebody will see this and they'll be like, somebody's airdropping a file. What is this? And they'll go click on it. And he's had several people while sitting in traffic, stuck, who have clicked on this to watch the video. Whether they've come to know Christ as their Savior, we don't know. but it's technology that can be used for God's glory. There's a blessing in it. There's a potential blessing. Yeah. Then there's living and teaching biblical principles. 2 Timothy 2:2, and the things that thou hast heard of me among many witnesses, the same commit thou to faithful men who should be able to teach others also. Again, social media can be used in great ways to help teach things to other people. When I was a youth pastor, there were so many times I would get online and I'd be like, hey, listen, I'm doing a series, or I'm thinking about doing a series on such and such. Does anybody have a good source material that we can use to teach this subject? And all of a sudden, you'd have 20, 30 youth pastors. Hey, you should check this one out. You should check this out. You should check this out. Our material that we've been watching with the men on Sunday mornings, you know where I got that from? Social media. I went to a group of pastors and said, hey, look, I really want to talk about biblical manhood, but I want to do it in a way where we can use a video that the men can watch and then we can discuss it. Does anybody have a series that they can recommend that they have watched with their men? And all of a sudden, here they come, chiming in. Hey, you should watch this series called the 33 series. Oh, okay. So I started watching it, and it's good material. Where did I get that from? Social media. It allows us to find things that show us how to live and teach biblical principles. There's also the ability to encourage and pray for others. Man, we see a whole community right now who's rallying around Naomi and her family, praying for her. Why? Because social media has been able to put it on there. Now, there's also a lot of false information that gets put on there, so you have to weed through those things. But you know, when Brother Glenn had his accident, not only did we text people, but I put a prayer request on our Facebook page. People shared that with other people. Hey, when we were trying to get love offerings to help with the expenses and whatnot, where did we go to? I went to social media and said, hey, anybody that wants to give to help the Strelo family, here's where we can give. And God used that as a blessing. Right? God can use those things. I don't think we have to be like, all of a sudden, stay away from it completely. However, I will say this. If you find yourself more often than not going to the pitfalls, then it's better to get away from it completely than to trust that you'll ever go to the blessings. Proverbs 25:11 says, a word fitly spoken is like apples of gold and pitchers of silver. Ephesians 4:29, let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth, but that which is good to the use of edifying, that it may minister grace unto hearers. I'm just going to also tell you this. If you have somebody who's asking you some personal questions on Facebook or social media, it is better to respond to them personally than it is to respond to them for everybody to see. If you see somebody's doing something wrong they shouldn't be doing, don't get on Facebook and publicly shame them. Reach out to them personally. Now, and I'm just going to say this just so young people understand this, because I know I've had some that have, sent friend requests or whatever. I don't accept friend requests from minors, and there's a reason why. To protect myself, right, and to protect you too. So understand that. So I just want to say that publicly, so you know why. So you don't feel like, well, pastor's just ignoring me. He must not care. No, there's a reason why I don't do that. Okay? So here's just a few practical principles, and we'll wrap this up. Practical principles for spiritual conduct. We should express humility. James 4:10 says, humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, and he shall lift you up. I had to learn this as a young man. Again, I've been singing since I was 11, 12 years old. And I've always loved singing. And at our church in Georgia when I was growing up, when I was a teenager, I would sing at the church. And I get asked to sing often. And people would come up and say, oh, man, you do such a good job. You got such a good voice. And I didn't know how to ever answer that. Oh, thank you. Yeah, that was a fun song to sing. I do have a good voice, don't I? I wouldn't answer it that way. But I can remember there's this old man, Mr. Pruitt. He'd walk up to me and he'd say, you remind me of somebody. Oh, yeah, Mr. Pruitt, who do I remind you of? There's a young man who got his start in gospel music. I was like, oh, yeah? Yeah. You remind me of Elvis Presley. I felt like saying, all shook up. No, but I had to get to the place where I was like, how do you answer that? It's the same way I answer when somebody might say, hey, Pastor, that was a great message today. If you ever notice, I always say, well, praise the Lord. It's all for Him. Why is that? I want to keep myself humble. If there's anything that ever comes great out of a message, it's not because of me. If it's truly great, it comes from Jesus. I could be a good speaker, but if all I do is speak good, and God doesn't get the glory from my speech, then it's not good. Deflect praise for you to God. That goes with this. 1 Corinthians 10:31, whether therefore you eat or drink or whatsoever you do all to the glory of self. Is that what it says? What's it say? All to the glory to God. Whatever we do should be for God's glory because He wants to have the preeminence. Engage in face-to-face ministry, not just social ministry. Now, is there a place for social ministry? Absolutely. I think of Miss Kelly, how that guy over in Africa that you've been able to have a social media contact with. It's amazing. It's a great thing. But let me just tell you something. When it comes to church interaction, there is nothing that will replace us sitting down having a face-to-face interaction. Not text messaging, not a phone call. Nothing is greater than face-to-face interaction. Now, texting is a great thing. If I need to get a hold of somebody really quickly, I can text them very quickly. But if there's a serious matter that has to be talked about, hey, the best way to do that is to do it face-to-face. Hey, if you can get to somebody and pray with them face-to-face, it's going to mean a whole lot more than doing it over a phone. I hate it. When somebody had to go to the hospital during COVID and they wouldn't let us in, I couldn't stand it. Why? It's a whole lot better if, as a pastor, I can be there right next to you and pray with you while holding your hand and praying. And telling you I love you and care for you. There's a difference between that and over the phone. That's why even like when Miss Penny, she had to go in, they wouldn't even let me in. So we had prayer outside the hospital. Can't stop me from doing that. Give priority to the local church. Give priority to the local church. Hebrews 10:25, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as the manner of some is, but exhorting one another, and so much more as you see the day approaching. Again, COVID has changed so many things. There are people that you probably had that were coming to church here before COVID that still haven't come back. I assume. I don't know. Now everybody's like, well, I can just watch it on Facebook. I can watch it on YouTube. Now, are those things a blessing? Yeah, absolutely they are. It's not the same, though. But it's great. Like today, like I do about every Sunday, I don't necessarily all the time, but almost every Sunday I get on my YouTube and I watch the service from Grace Baptist Church in Royston. Why? Because that's still my home church. Those are still the people that were my church for 11 years. And I still have my pastor there, yeah. And he encourages my heart through his preaching. Because as a pastor, guess what? I need to hear preaching too. It's a wonderful thing. But we cannot let it take the place of church. We cannot let it take the place of coming to church. A lot of people have done it. Well, I give my tithe online. There's something different, though, about sitting down next to the people that you love and care for that you can't do from the comfort of your own home. You can't sit down and have lunch together with the church family if you're at home, because we're not going to live stream lunch. right? Here's a digital sandwich for you. We're not going to live stream lunch. No, we need that interaction, that sitting down, fellowshipping together. Don't forsake the assembling of the church. And then also, parents, this is for you. Be actively involved in your children's activities. Know what your children are looking at. Know what your children are listening to. Know what your children have on their phone. Oh, that sounds like we're spying. No, it's called being a parent. It's called being a parent. There's a reason why I try to tell my kids, you've got to have your computer out in the living room and not in your bedroom. Why? Because I had computers in my bedroom and I know what I got into. And it was awful. A lot of times it was by accident. Some people look at me and think I'm crazy because I've got a 12 and 13-year-old that don't have phones. They don't need them. They're either with me or they're with somebody I know. And if they're with somebody I know and they need me, they can use that person's phone. There's too much junk available on these little dumb phones, smart devices. This is a computer in the palm of your hand, and you can get on just as much as I could when I had to have a full computer to do it. Be actively involved in your children's activities. Now, I'm not saying if you've got a 12, 13-year-old, you shouldn't give them a phone. I understand different circumstances for different people. I understand that. If my kids were at the public school and they were going to be gone all the time on sports events and stuff like that, I probably would do something differently. My kids had a phone when we were in Georgia because Alex would be gone until 5 o'clock in the evening most evenings because he was on cross country. Once we got here, though, and I know where my kids are, and they're with us most of the time, and they're with somebody we know all the time, I was like, you don't need the phone anymore. I know where you are. I know who you're with. But you need to be actively involved in what your children are doing. Why do I say that? Because the Bible tells us, as soon as my tablet opens back up, I had the verse sitting right here. Ephesians 6:4, and you fathers provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. What do you do with a plant when you're trying to get it to grow? You nurture it, right? You spend time with it. You water it. You feed it. You don't just do it once and leave it alone. We just bought some planters yesterday because we're going to plant a garden hopefully this year, but we're going to do it from seed. And so we got that little planter where you pour the water in, the peat, whatever those things are, grow up, and you put your seed down in there. You know, Renee put the seeds in there yesterday. She watered them. They're wet. Guess what she's going to have to do in a couple days? Water it again. Why? Because if she doesn't nurture it, what's it going to do? It's going to die. If you don't know, if you don't spend time with your children and you're not active in the heart and life of your children, you know what's going to happen to them? They're going to walk away from everything that you think is good and right. Now, there is a difference between nurturing and demanding, though. There's a difference in nurturing and commanding. There's a difference in, as a pastor, me nurturing or me being a dictator. Whatever I preach from the Word of God, I hope I'm living. Why? Because that's nurturing. If I get up here and I tell you this is what you ought to do, but I don't live that way, what's it going to do? It's going to make you say, I don't want anything to do with God. Yeah, right. That guy's a hypocrite. He gets up there and he preaches that we need to be out in the community preaching about Jesus Christ, but he's never out in the community. He sits at home all day and does nothing. He teaches about being a servant, but you never see him serving anybody but himself. What is that going to do to your outlook of not only the pastor, but the outlook of the Bible? If Jesus wasn't out serving and he was just telling his disciples to do everything that he wanted them to do, what would those disciples have done? Yeah, right, you're not the Messiah. I'm out of here. Parents, we've got to lead by example. Amen? Nurture and admonish. Yes, know what's being taught in school. Be active in your school. Even if your kids are in public school, be active. You can combat a lot of the false teaching by being active. By saying, hey, what did you learn in school today? Well, we were talking about how dinosaurs are millions of years. Well, is that true? Well, no, it's not. So why do we not believe that? Because the Bible says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And have those conversations with your kids. Doesn't mean that if they go to public school, they can't be strong Christians, because they can. But what happens is so many times as parents, we put them in a Christian school or put them in a public school or put them in homeschool in front of videos, and we take our hands off. But God said to nurture and admonish in Christ. Know what your kids are doing. Know what they're doing. Amen. Let's go ahead and bow our heads, close our eyes. Brother Kevin, if you and I will go ahead and head to the back. Brother Mark, if you'll have some music playing for an invitation. If God's spoken to your heart, the altar will be open. We're going to get back and get ready for baptism and be ready for that in just a few moments. But let's go ahead and pray and stand to our feet. And Lord, we thank you so much for this day. I know it's been an unusual message. Really more of a lesson than a message, God. More teaching than preaching. But God, I pray, however you've used that today, Lord, that you would just show us in our lives where we can guard ourselves better. And God will thank you and praise you for that. With head bowed and eyes closed, if God spoke to your heart, once you come this morning, Brother Kevin, we'll go ahead and meet here in the back. Brother Mark, just maybe about 2 verses of a song, and then you guys can be seated.